I'd like to say good morning and thank you for coming. Today's topic here is on summer tips as far as pond problems that you may find and have occurring. And with that, I have the handouts here, and we're going to be going down through the handout for you for the most part. First off, a lot of times people will come in and they've got two types of green water, or algae. And there's two types of algae primarily. There's green water algae and there's hair algae. And with green water algae, a lot of times you need to have more flow going through your pond, the water turning faster. And with that, a lot of times people will say, well, you know, my filter gets clogged and I've got to clean it every day, or, you know, it clogs up and my pump won't work. Good morning. So a lot of times people get very frustrated with the water and the filtering on there, and so they pull the filter off and they just let the water run through the pump and up through their waterfall or through their fountain and back down. Now, usually what I find here is that to help combat the green water is that more filtering is better than less all the time. And the faster you can turn your water through your pond, the better off you are, because this means more water is going by the filter faster. Now, the filter does two things. One is the filter collects garbage out of the water, which sounds reasonable because it's called the filter. The other side is that the filter harbors an area for the microbes to live in. Now, the microbes are what you usually get in your microbe lift here, and they need a home. They can't live basically on the pond liner. They do, but there's not a lot of surface area for them there. And on the filter, there's a lot more area for them to live on. And so they colonize there, and these microbes are what eats up the green algae that you get in your pond. Now, when you go and you pull your filter off and you clean it from all the garbage, you also wash out all the beneficial microbes that you have in there. So this causes a dilemma for a lot of folks, and in most cases I try and ask people to have spare filters ready to go, you know, backup filters, or to add more filtering material, or to even throw in some other items that will go and hold the biologicals. Now, we have little bags inside, and in the bags you can end up, if you need more surface area for your biologicals, this is a product called SpringFlow, and this is one of the many different types of items. Now, this is a ribbon, and it just peels off, and then you pull it all off. It's kind of like the ribbon that you get at Christmas, you know, as you're trying to wrap your presents, and it comes on those little spools, and there's no edges and they fall off and it makes a big mess. Well, that's pretty much what this is, okay? Only at the end of this, after you make the mess, you stuff it in a bag and then you throw it in a pond with a rock in the bottom and you say good riddance, and you've done something good. Now, I also have other items like these. This is a box of rocks, and I don't know, you know, this is not the most exciting box of rocks that you're going to ever come across, but some people like using rocks. Personally, for me, I'm finding that I'm getting to be not as strong as I used to be, and where this SpringFlow here weighs 3 pounds and will have a surface area of, I think it said like 2,000 feet or so, or 200 plus square feet of surface area. Sorry, moved the decimal point too far. This, you have 6.5 pounds of rock in here, and it gives you a surface area of about it's 1 cubic foot in here, but you've got a surface area of around 8 square feet, I believe. And so those are two different things that you can look at. Now the other one that I have is little foam blocks, and with the foam blocks you can also stuff them in the bag. And again, I ask you to kind of put a rock in there and let it sink down. Now in the tank that we have over on the side here with our water lilies in it, that has the bag with the foam in there, and we can look at that at the end of the class because I'm going to get wet when I pull it out. But it gets all slimy and gradouish and things like that, but it's very lightweight. A lot of times people will have a filter where they use lava rock because they heard that it's good and they know it's cheap, and you know, yes, it is good and it is cheap, but it also weighs a lot, especially when it's wet, and when it's filled up with garbage it weighs even more. So I try and ask you not to use that. A lightweight media is always better. Now let's go back to the water flow, and what I normally ask people to do is go through and calculate the amount of square feet or gallons, either way, of water in their pond. Now, on average, you go length, average length times average width times average depth. Okay? Now, if your pond is 10 feet long and 8 feet wide and 3 feet deep at the max, it's not a square, so you've got to kind of shrink that down so it may be 9 by 5 by 2, okay? Well, 9 by 5 is going to be 45, times 2 is going to be 90. Now, the hard part here is we have to then multiply 90 times 7.5, which gives you how many gallons fit in a square foot of water. So you've got 90 times 7.5, or around, now we've got over 650 gallons of water in our pond. I find that people that turn their water at least twice in an hour have less problems, and those people that turn their pond water 3 times in an hour have even fewer problems. So your pond may be sitting out there and you may have your 650 gallons, 700 gallons or so. You should be looking at a pump that pumps at least 1,500 gallons, because you have to also take into account for the height that you're moving the water back up, and this will cut your flow down. But I would normally start somebody off with at least 1,500 gallons. And the other side is that the more water you're moving, the louder the sound is going to be. When a lot of times we put ponds in for people, we always sell them a much bigger pump than what the people think that they want. And when you get done with that, they're very happy with the amount of noise that they can hear. Now, I was just out at a house yesterday, and at that one house they had one pump that was able to move all the water 2 times in an hour. But they also had 3 other pumps there. One pump was for the spitters that they had lining there, and then the other 2 pumps were to increase the water flow should they be entertaining or sitting out there, or the wind be blowing or something like that. So these people had a lot of pumps, but they only had one that was working day in, day out. And then the others they had on switches that they could turn on and run at will. Now, a lot of times people don't want to run their pump all the time. They're like, well, you know, I'm not home during the day, so I'd like a timer to shut it off, or, you know, I don't want to run it at night because I'm sleeping and I don't want to waste the electricity. If you've got a pond, you basically need to have your water running 24 hours a day, because those microbes, if they aren't getting that influx of green algae past their living quarters, they're not going to be able to eat, and if they don't eat, they don't keep your water clean. So always trying to leave one pump going is always best. Now if you want to go and have 2 pumps in your pond, or 3, or even 4 like this lady had, you know, that's fine, but always try and keep one running. Now this is over dealing more with green water is going through the filter and the microbes eating that. The other side is the string or hair algae, and what we find is that with that, if you move your water faster, you have less hair algae. Now your hair or string algae usually builds up in your shallow areas much faster than they build up in your depth areas. And so if you are making your pond, a lot of times the shorter the runway that you have, or the creek, or whatever you want to call it, the less hair algae buildup you're going to have right away. And so this will help you out by making deep water areas, okay? So if you do have a runway, and here on our ponds we have 2 runways, they're the ones that build up with algae first, and there's a number of different things you can end up doing. Before the season gets going, you can throw in barley, and a little barley is leaking out there. But as barley starts to decompose, it gives off a chemical which inhibits string algae's growth. Okay? Now, if you have a pond and you've got string algae and you throw barley in, it does help, okay, but it doesn't kill it. It just inhibits the growth. And so the barley here in a bag is pretty nice because it holds most of this barley together. And this says this bag right here will treat up to 500 gallons. Now, you normally want to go and put this in an area where the water is going to be passing by, okay? So you can put it in the stream, you can kind of put it in the filter. If you've got some of the skimmers, you can put it in the skimmer or else in front of the skimmer. There's different areas that you can put these. But this is going to be one of the things that you can look for. Now, they also have barley pellets. This breaks down faster. And the pellet you can just scatter over the water and it kind of dissolves and gets sucked up and works right away. And you don't have some bag sitting there getting filled up with muck and garbage. But if you throw a lot of pellets in, you can end up increasing the amount of sludge sitting in the bottom of your pond. And lastly, again, for your string or hair algae, you've got barley in a liquid. And so you can just measure this out and dump it in, and you're not adding any products in there. And these are all natural there. Okay, now, should you end up having algae, there's products out there. This is Algae Destroyer Advanced. And then this is Algaway 5.4, and with these 2 products, they're fairly close. The 5.4 has more concentration in it than the Algae Destroyer here. We also have Algae Fix. This is a product that we used here in our pond this year. 2 years ago we used the barley. This year we're using this. But those also are going to go and help. Now, should you end up having a lot of algae and it's stuck all to the rocks and everything like that, last year we tried this algae off, and this was a pretty fun project for us to do. It's a powder in here, and it comes with its own little spoon, and you turn the pump off, and then you go out to where the algae is on the rocks, and you sprinkle this on. And then you sit around for a half hour or maybe even an hour. And what ends up happening is this is like OxyClean. It OxyClean for your pond. No, but this is all natural here. It's sodium carbonate, okay? But it causes it to bubble and boil and causes the string algae to release there. And so when you turn the water back on, all of a sudden all this algae starts breaking off and running down, flooding down into your pond. So if you're using this, you've got to be ready for a while to catch all the stuff that comes off your rocks and down into your pond. Now, we also have another product, excuse me, in there called AK, and AK also helps with string algae, and it also helps with green water. So those are a couple of different things. Now, people all the time come in and say, you've got like 5 or 6 different products on the shelf. Why do you have so many? Well, I will tell you, over a lifetime of learning, that not one product works for everybody, okay? I know that, you know, for me, I like creamy peanut butter and I like Jif. And I know my kid, he likes crunchy peanut butter and he likes Skippy. And, you know, it goes on like that. And so if you just realize that they have different products out there to meet everybody's needs, we normally try and start you off with one. And for most people, this Microbe Lift works really well. It's got very easy to follow directions, and it is very stinky. So, you know, as far as medicine goes, if it stinks or tastes bad, then you know it's got to work. So there's that for you to end up using. Yes? Yep. And actually that's, I think, number 7 or 8 that we're going to be looking at here on the handout. The handouts are all in the back. Sorry, I didn't expect people to come in from the front here today. So the main things that I want to readdress is, 1, keep your water moving fairly well, and 2, have plenty of filtration or plenty of area for your microbes to live. And then if you're going to clean your filter, don't clean the whole filter. Only clean half or, you know, 2/3, but don't clean the whole thing, because as you're cleaning it, like I made mention, you're going to wash off the beneficials. And for a lot of people that don't have a big system, a big filtering system, I have them get extra pads, and they just throw a spare pad or 2 into the pond, and then it houses the biologicals. And then when the filter that is garbaged up, junked up, and they want to wash it, they pull that pad out, and they take the pad that was sitting in the pond and they slap it in to where it's now going to be a filter, okay? And they take the filter that is all shrunk up and loaded with garbage, but it's also loaded with beneficials. They take that out, they wash that out, and this is great stuff for the garden, okay? For the flowers, they love this, the garbage that you get out of your filter. So you wash that off someplace in your yard, and then you stick the clean filter or pad that you just had back into the pond, and then it has a chance to reinitialize with the beneficial microbes while the filter that you have in there is doing the work of cleaning. Okay? All right. So with that, now we're going to go to number 7. Okay? And I will tell you that with any of these products here, people will come in and they say, you know, I'm not finding this is working, or I'm not finding that's working. One of the top things that we have you then look at if items aren't working is going to be doing a water pH test, okay? And you can buy the big box like this, and this gives you, I think like 200 tests or so in here, and it's $50. Or you can buy, this is a salt level test kit, which we'll talk about in a minute. That's 10. And your pH test kit here. And this will read from 5.0 to 9.0. And the median for your pH or average or balance or whatever you want to list it at is 7.0. So years ago I had a pond, or I was taking care of my mother-in-law's pond, I'll put it that way, and I had the water all clear and everything was going along real well, and I had some floaters in there, the hyacinths and a couple of lettuce, and I had some water lilies in there, but my hyacinths kept getting smaller, and my lettuce kept getting smaller, and my lilies were getting smaller, and you know, the sun was out, it was shining, it was hot, you know, everything was perfect for growth for these plants, and I couldn't get anything. And then there was brown edges around the edge of the plant, and I'm thinking, well, you know, this is usually indicative of either salt buildup or lack of water. And so, you know, it's like, well, the plant's sitting in water, so it can't be lack of water. So I did a salt test, and the salts were fine. And so I waited a week and waited another week, and my mother-in-law is, you know, asking me when these plants are going to start blooming. She really wants to see something. And so it finally occurred to me, why don't I go and check the pH? I said, you know, I drink the water, I put it out on the grass and everything like that. And so I know it's good water, but I'll still check it. Well, when I checked it, the water was at like 8.2 to 8.5, somewhere in there. And it was so much alkali that none of the plants were growing. And so I immediately went, and when I say immediately, for my mother-in-law, it was one of those things where, you know, I came back to town and I got it and I went back at it. It wasn't waiting another week, because when I realized I had made a mistake, I wanted to correct it right there. And so I got a bottle of pH Down. Now, pH Down helps acidify the water, and you know, I was real good about this. I read the directions, and I will tell you, reading the directions are very important with pond products, because if you have fish and you don't follow your directions, I don't care what it says about being safe for fish, you can kill them. Okay, you can burn their gills, you can cause problems. And she had fish, and so I was checking this out and, you know, pouring it in, and then I waited a while, and then I went back out later that night and I did a pH test check again, and it still said the same thing, and I'm like, oh great, I've got a bad bottle. So I added a little bit more, and then right before we left that night, I did another pH check. Nothing happened. And it says wait 24 hours. Well, of course, me being a guy, I wouldn't wait 24 hours, okay? So I then went back the next day, and I did another pH check, and it was still over 8. And so I added some more. I'd said, you know, my 24 hours are up. I'm putting some more in. And it wouldn't come down, and it wouldn't come down, and I did this for like 5 days, and I said, you know, I have a really bad bottle. And all of a sudden, on like the 5th time I added it, it came down. It shot right down to right around 7, okay? But the company tells you on here that you have to check, and you have to keep adding, okay? And it's not something that happens with one application, okay? And I kept thinking it's going to be a 1 application dose. But when the water decides to move, and on the gauges that we have, it moves kind of quickly at times. Other times it'll move more slowly. But it's going to depend also, what I found out, is on the type of rocks that you have. And where I had rocks that had calcium in there, it didn't change the pH near as fast as if I had had a rock that had more granite in it. And so this is something that I've learned, is that the type of rock that you might have in your pond also can affect the change, how quickly your water can change its pH. But within a week I had the water back down right close to 7. Fish like the water on an alkali side. Plants like the water on an acid side. She loved her fish dearly, so we kept it a little more on the alkali side. But I learned an important lesson there, is that even though I thought that the water was good, I didn't realize that running the water over the rocks that we were doing was adding a little bit. And as the evaporation was going off, the concentration was growing much quicker than what I had anticipated. The other side is that when I was fertilizing with a product that had sulfur in it, and so the sulfur was neutralizing the alkalinity as I was putting it down on the grass and on the plants, and so I wasn't seeing as much alkali showing up in the yard that we were finding on the plants. So I did learn my lesson. Now, the other thing I will tell you is that when you're doing your pH check, you cannot hold your finger on top of the vial when you're shaking your water up, because it'll pull the pH off your finger, which will change the reading here. So you have to make sure you put the cap back on and, you know, shake it up with the cap. It's one of those things where, being a guy, sometimes you don't always follow all the directions the first time. But, you know, once you've learned, you do much better. Now, salt here also is one of those products where you have to look at what items are you working at trying to be benefiting more. Salt is a good thing to have. A little bit of salt in your water at all times helps keep the slime coat up on your fish. Now, the slime coat doesn't sound really exciting. It sounds kind of ugly, actually. But the slime coat helps keep off diseases and parasites and things like this for the fish. And by having a healthy slime coat, they are less likely to end up getting sick. So the other side is that plants don't like salt. Okay, salt causes burning of the leaves, which I made mention earlier. And so from time to time, you can go and you can add some salt into your pond, but you always want to check. And a slight bit of salt in there won't usually hurt your plants. It's when you start dosing heavier. And there's directions on the packages of salt how much you can add. And one of the things is that if you end up getting fish that are sick or injured or ulcerated or whatever you want to call those wounds that fish can get, you can put them in a tub and give them a super high dose of salt. It's like 10% salt, and really help clean them out. Now, I'm telling you, when I first heard about these salt baths for fish with ulcers, I was like, you know, I get a cut here at the nursery and I'm sweating and I get salt in there, that hurts. So I don't know how those poor fish feel when you put them in 10% salt bath like that. You know, if they were able to scream, I'm sure they would be, but you know, it's all better for them at the end. So, okay. So, now, normally I sell a whole lot more pH down for everybody down here in the valley, okay? The only real way that you're going to need to raise your pH is that if you have acid, and normally acid comes from falling pine needles, okay, or blowing pine needles in. Now, I say normally. The other side is that maples and oaks, okay, have properties in them which can also in the fall raise the acid levels up. We use tannic acids to tan hides, and so if you have a pond and you've got leaves falling in, you want to try and scoop those out, because if they stay in there, they can raise the acid level in your pond, which can also hurt your fish. So there's that. Now, we'll go back. Other issues that people will have is that their plants aren't growing. Okay, as I made mention with my mother-in-law, her plants weren't growing and it was pH. The other thing would be is that people don't realize they need to fertilize pond plants. And there are these cute little stakes that you can end up getting here. And Job's has these. And for me, I find these very handy. They're, you know, just a little bit bigger than your finger, and you can then push them down into the soil, but you want to push them all the way in. Okay, if you push them into the dirt, then they're completely pond safe for you. They won't hurt your fish, and they don't leak material out to get into the water to cause an algae bloom. So that's one type. Now the other one is these Grow Power tablets like this, and these tablets also work great for pond plants, and they have humic acid. Now I just went through my big spiel about acids and alkali and everything like that. It's got humic acid, which is a beneficial acid for the plants, so this will help other plants if some of this should leak out. But you want to have those down in there. Now most of your pond plants usually will do fine with once a year feeding. Do fine. Your water lilies, they are your heavy feeders. And if you can stay on your lilies and fertilize those usually once a month or so, you'll get a lot more flowers and a lot of growth out of them. The lily, we redid our pond this winter, and we pulled out one lily, and one root was over 6 feet long. We had chopped it up into 3 pieces to get it out, and I've got one piece sitting down here in the pond right now, but it was just tremendously long and huge. It was, you know, I don't know if you've ever gone to the ocean and been out walking in tidal pools and stuff and seen these giant sea cucumbers or sea slugs. You know, they're about as big around as my arm. Well, it's got all these marks all over it, and you can pick it up, and it's all kind of oozy and stuff like that. It's stuff that, you know, nightmares can be made of for, like, my wife. And, you know, it was huge like that, and it just was out looking for food. And, you know, food comes in the form of fertilizer, and you know, it had done quite well. Now these large spikes like this, these will last for a whole year on lilies. Okay, now depending on how big the lily is, depends how many spikes you need to put in. So you'll be looking at doing that. But again, either, you know, on your lilies, whether they be the hardy lilies or the tropical lilies, they still need a lot of food. All right. The other issue is that I have people that want to just throw fertilizer in to help with fertilizing their plants. They think that they can just throw anything in there. These products are specially designed to be fish safe and pond safe for you. Issues that I have found with fertilizing is people will sometimes, they'll be wandering around over here on these benches that we have, and these are terrestrial perennials. And then these over here are water plant perennials. And people will find the same plant, and this one over here is $10 and that one over there is $13, and they'll say, well, I'm going to save $3 and buy this one. Well, when they take it home, they don't realize, and they put it in their pond, that this has fertilizer that works in soil. And this one over here has fertilizer that works in the pond. And all of a sudden, their pond starts turning green because the nitrogen that was in that soil mix over there, all of a sudden erupts out with all this water that is now available and feeds all this green algae for them. And so that's a problem. The other side is that these plants over here a lot of times have more phosphorus in it, and phosphorus also can cause algae growth. Okay, we think back to the 70s when the Great Lakes were dying and we had all the pollution and it was all foamy and everything was going wrong back there. We thought that the world was coming to an end then also. You know, that was caused by phosphates being dumped into the water supply. Well, you can have the same problem in your pond is if you take these plants that have high amounts of phosphorus and you put them into your pond, that releases out. Now, one of the things that I also will find and tell you is that you'll see the pond here has bubbles as it spills over the spillway. Well, if you have too much phosphorus in your pond, you get great big bubbles and they drift along across the top, and this is one of the easy things to look for. Now, there's products also that are out here called Foam Away, because some people's ponds just naturally make foam, their water does, and it's not because of phosphates, and you can apply Foam Away. I don't see any Foam Away in here, but you can add some Foam Away. The other side is that if the Foam Away isn't working, okay, go back. Anytime your chemicals aren't working, check your pH, okay? That's vital, okay? So if the Foam Away isn't working, check your pH. I had a customer in from Dayton this year. He bought Foam Away, and then, you know, it didn't work, and then we had him check his phosphorus, and that didn't work. And then we had him bring in some water samples, and we checked his pH. And again, it was very alkali, so we sent him back home with some pH down. And then his foaming stopped right after he started getting his pH back into balance. So that will work out quite well for him there. Now, see here. I don't think there's anything else to really deal with on fertilizing. Just don't apply a granular type fertilizer over the surface or a liquid type fertilizer. Okay? One of the other problems that people a lot of times will have is they have lawn companies that come and either they spray the grass with a liquid type fertilizer or they put a granular fertilizer down. Anytime that fertilizer falls into the water, it can cause these problems, the foaming or the algae bloom or anything like that. So if you can try and make sure that when they're putting it down that they use a drop spreader, or that they don't go close to the lawn, or they use an organic fertilizer on the grass, these are all things that will help. One of the other issues is that if you have grass that's upwind and the grass clippings blow into the pond, they are also high in fertilizer, and as they break down, they add sludge to your pond, but they also release nutrients which can cause an increased algae bloom for you. So you want to watch that. Okay, next one down is water depth. Normally I will tell you, if your pond is constantly getting string algae, hair algae, or is being green, a lot of times your pond may not be deep enough. Now, there are people out there all the time that tell you that your pond has to be 3 feet deep. You got to have a minimum of 3 feet. The year that it went, the thermometer that was hanging out here, it showed 28 below zero, okay? We had these little 18-inch pond forms that we had sitting out on top of the ground showing people what could be done, and they froze almost solid, okay? Almost. So, and they were sitting on top of the ground. Now we had soil and stuff around the edges, but they were sitting there. 50 to 80% of the fish in there died, okay? But the other 20 to 50% of the fish survived. And so you'll say, well, that doesn't sound like very good odds. And I will tell you that sounds like great odds, because we almost never get below 10 below. And this was an 18-inch pond that was sitting on top of the ground. And usually when you put them in the ground, they never freeze near to the extent because you've got a lot more heat from the soil around you to keep that up. And so the fish that froze were ones that weren't able to settle all the way to the bottom down there. Okay? So for most people, I will tell you, 18 inches of water is plenty deep if you bury your pond. Okay? And you want to have fish. Should it go and get really, really cold, having a little heater in the winter is going to be good for you. And the heater just keeps a little area warm, okay? It doesn't heat the whole pond. It just keeps a little area warm, and that will be beneficial, but that's not a summer pond problem, okay? But the more depth you have, the harder it is for the water to, or the sunlight to go through the water and generate more algae. Now, other things that also stop the sunlight from going through are plants, okay? Whether they be lilies or the floaters like the hyacinths or any of the other water hawthorns or anything like that with big leaves that sit on the surface. Or else one of the things that I have found is hugely beneficial is these blockers. And this is called BioBlue, and this turns the water blue. And if you look over here, the water has a little bluish green hue to it. I added some of this BioBlocker in there so people could see what it looks like. And this year we found Watershade, these fizz tabs, and they're just that. They're these blue tablets. You can take them out and throw them in, and it's one tablet for every 50 gallons of water. So if you ended up finding that when you were trying to use the blue here, that it got on your good shoes or good clothes or whatever it was and you couldn't get it out because it stains most everything. These tablets are now available, and they're fun to throw in and watch them fizz up. They also have Bio Black. This is ones for those people that have like reflecting pools, or they don't want to have the blue coloring. This is a black. It's just a different colorant that you can put in. But that helps stop the sunlight from going through if you have a shallow pond. Again, the deeper the pond, the less algae, green water you're going to end up having. Okay. Number 4 here was algae control, and we've kind of gone through almost all of this. And again, the one thing that we haven't had up here is called AK, and that product has done quite well for us also. I have hundreds of people that swear by this algae fix. I will tell you that this year, putting it in our pond over here, it worked wonderful. One gentleman came in not yesterday, must have been 2 days ago now, and he said that he had been using it, but his fish came up and they seemed to indicate to him that they had gill irritation. And you know, when that happens, they're usually up at the top of the water by the waterfall and opening and closing their mouth, looking like they're gulping for air. And he thinks it was from the algae fix. So, you know, I'll throw that out there. But anytime you can use some of the organic products, and your microblift is organic, your barley is organic, these all will work well. The BioBlue doesn't stain the fish like it stains you and I, so you don't turn your yellow fish green or anything like that. But there's that for you to look at. Now, there are people that never seem to get their pond balanced right. They don't get their pond balanced right because they don't want to have the bags of foam or bags of ribbon or, you know, other things thrown in the pond, and they're not overly patient waiting for nature to reach a balance, and so they decide they want to go to the UV light system. Now the UV is basically the be-all, end-all that is out there if you've got green water. Okay, UV lights do not do anything to stop string or hair algae from forming. But if you've got green water in your pond, this is a great product that you can end up putting in. Now, this one here happens to go in the skimmer that we have down here in the pond underneath the little boy, and it just slides right in and locks in. But your UV puts out a light emission called ultraviolet, which will then go and kill off green water. Okay, it also kills off all the other beneficials. It kills everything. And one of the issues, a warning on here, is that if you plug it in and you look at it, you can definitely hurt your eyesight. Okay, it can quite possibly make you blind. So they always come enclosed in an area so that should you go and open things up to look in there, that you don't see the direct light. Now, UV lights are lights that usually, like all lights, are only good for a number of hours, okay? And so if you're going to use UV lights, they're usually good for, the bulb is good for 1 year. The bulb may work for more years after that, but the intensity of the light that is emitted from there decreases since the moment you plug it in and start using it for the first time. So I've been out to people who hate these things because they forget and the lights break in the winter, or that they're taking them out after the summer is over and they drop them and they break or whatever. If you're going to own a UV light, basically realize you have to buy a replacement bulb every year for you to be happy the following year for it, okay? Now, if you only run your UV for, a month or two, you're going to have more life left out of it. But if you put it in your pond for a whole season, a lot of times you've got one more year that it will work, but it decreases in the powerful emissions that it puts out. So that bulb right there was over $200. There's other ones that you can buy that go in line. There's some that you put in the pond. There's some that you put out of the pond. But, basically you start looking at around $80 to $100 for the start of your UV lights. But you have to realize that depending on the water flow past the light will dictate what size light you need and how powerful it is. The more water you have going past, the bigger the light you're going to need. The smaller the pump, the smaller the hose, the smaller the light you can have. And if you don't have an electrical source available to you that you can plug the UV into, then it's not going to do you any good because you have to have an electrical source there. All right. Now, other problems that we end up occurring, should your pond not be working, okay, then you end up with mosquitoes. And mosquito dunks are a great all-natural biological control. This product won't hurt your fish. Now, 99.9% of the time when you have moving water and you have fish or frogs, you won't have mosquito larvae that will go and go from a juvenile state to an adult state, because the frogs or the fish will eat it. Whether you have mosquito fish that you can get from the city, or if you've got frogs that hop in, or you've got koi or goldfish, whatever it is, they're usually in there, and most fish will eat just about anything, okay? They're just like you and me. We want to sample stuff, and we'll eat almost anything that we see moving. So these mosquito dunks work great for kid pools, kiddie pools, tires that have water in them, bird baths that the birds aren't, hanging out in or anything like that. That's where I usually recommend this. Now, another product, and this is disease of mosquitoes. That's how this works. If you want to have fun, okay, for those of you that think, tormenting insects is fun, this mosquito-free water this product is fun because you squirt it on top of the pond or anything else that you have, and it breaks the tension, so when the mosquitoes go to land on it, they immediately sink, okay? And so it's like, you know, it's a little gross at the end of the season to find all these dead mosquitoes in there, but it's like, ha ha, got you. And so you squirt this in there, and this bottle here will treat acres of water, okay? Acres. So just a little bit. It's highly concentrated, so I want you to be aware of that. Now, another one that's out there, this is this is kind of funny. It's a jar inside of a jar, okay? But this is biological insect control. This is a larvicide, but it also comes with a measuring cup, and they put it in the bigger jar so you can read the directions easier, because on the side of the bottle it gets so tiny that I'm finding that even I can't read the fine print any longer, so I know I'm getting older. All right. Animal pests. We've got a number of things. Herons like to come in and they love fish. Herons are supposed to be a solitary bird, and if they see another heron out there, they're not supposed to come down and eat your fish because they know somebody else is hunting. Now again, these guys only work as well as you make them work, okay? If you don't move your heron around on a regular basis, the other heron gets smart and says, well, that heron's pretty dumb because he's been there for like 2 weeks in a row and he hasn't gotten anything, okay? So I better go down and help him out. So if you move your heron around your pond, you're going to find that this will improve the ability for him to work. The other thing, like these other scarecrow type objects, would be the owl. I see people that get those plastic owls and they put them out, and after about 2 or 3 weeks they find that other creatures have started coming over and pecking the eyes out and pecking the nose off. It's because the animals realize that it's not moving and they're getting even, okay? Well, they're getting even with a plastic thing. So there's that. Other objects that work here, this is called scarecrow. This you hook up to your garden hose, and it's got a little eye on here, and when it sees movement, it turns the water on and it sprays whatever's out there. So if you've got a raccoon or a skunk or a bear or a deer or a dog or a cat or the neighbor's kids or whatever, it turns it on, and you can set the control for how long you want it to run. I think 3 seconds is the shortest burst, and I think 3 minutes is the longest. It will go, it sprays out about 45 feet, depending on the water pressure, 30 to 45 feet, and works out quite well. Now this company also makes other little products. It's called Cat Stop, and people say, oh, you know, what's he doing with Cat Stop out here? But cats are very similar with their hearing to like raccoons and skunks, and so you can get this little object that works on a battery, and it emits a high frequency noise, and you can place these around your pond. And where skunks and raccoons may be deterred by water like this, they may end up coming back in, and on a rainy night or something like that, they may go for a dip in your pond, and you said, well, I had my scarecrow working, and it may not work for you. But I will tell you, those people that have the little Cat Stop, and I think they're around $70, you can put that out by your pond, and as you walk by, you will trip it, and it makes the noise because it sees you, but most everybody won't hear any noise out of it, except for the click that it makes as it sounds, so you would know that it's actually working. But it does work on cats and dogs, so if you've got a pond next to an area where the dog's going to run by to get through the dog door, or the cat or something like that, you've got to locate this so your animal can, that you want to have come and visit you, get in and out, but the animals that you don't want to have visit you were deterred. And Greg, who works here, he put one in, and it was working great. He had no problems. He had a raccoon that had been in and ripped up all his water hyacinths and eaten his fish and done all sorts of problems, and he put one of those in, and it worked wonderful, but he had it outside his back door, and he failed to realize that you get about 1,000 workings off one little 9-volt battery. Well, after about 3 months of him walking back and forth and the animal coming over, he had used up his 1,000 noisy mittens. And, you know, after a couple of days, the raccoon came back in 3 months after he'd put it in, and it wouldn't trigger, so it got in, tore out all the water hyacinths, and ate his fish. So it's one of those things where you've got to be paying attention. Now lastly on here are some clarifiers, and clarifiers do just that. They help take all the garbage, the little tiny particulate matter that's floating around in the water, and grouping it together so that the filter can pull it out. Okay, it's kind of like when we look out, the sky looks real nice and clean right now, but 2 days ago it was all covered in smoke from the fires. Well, a clarifier will take the smoky stuff in the water and groups it all together in a bigger ball so that the filter can pull it out. So if we had had the blessing of having a rainstorm, the rain would have gathered all the particulate matters together and had a lot of that smoke fall out of the sky. But that didn't happen. So here's a bacterial clarifier there that's called EcoFix. And this also helps break down dead algae and stuff that's in the bottom of the pond. Clear, another one. Works within an hour. And AccuClear is another for you. So with that, we've kind of gone over a lot of the different products that are sitting up here. And this is called Pond Block. This one here, it shows a picture of a fish on the front here, but you're not supposed to use it in a pond that has fish in there. Now the other side is that out in the front here I've got fish food, and this is crustacean treats, and this I think has vegetables in it, and there's color enhancers and all sorts of things in your fish food. One of the big problems that I usually find for people is that they love to feed their fish. I had a lady who fed her fish in the morning and then came home for lunch and fed her fish at lunchtime and then fed her fish at dinner time, and she was just thrilled to death. And her fish were growing and having a great time, and then her water was getting more and more murky all along, and she was not able to keep her water clear. And so after a while she had to feed her fish because she couldn't see them in the pond. The pond was all dirty. She had a UV light that was working. Her filters were clogging up. Everything was going wrong, but you know, she just wanted to see her fish more. And so the thing I told her is, you got to stop feeding your fish. She wasn't real happy with me, but she went home and she did it. And after 2 weeks of not feeding her fish, she started to see them because the water was clearing up. And then after a month, her water in her pond was perfectly clear again. And then I told her, once that happens, you can throw some food in, but I only want you to feed 2 or 3 times a week. So she does that now on a regular basis. She's very happy with me. And light feedings, you know, she just throws some out in there. As long as the fish come up and eat it, they want to eat the food. If you throw the food in there and the food sinks and you're supposed to have floating food and the fish don't eat it, then they're not hungry. There's plenty of food in the pond for the fish to eat, okay? It's just that these fish food products here are much tastier than what's in the pond. This is like having pizza and ice cream and barbecued ribs or whatever thrown at you with, you know, a little wine on the side and, you know, maybe a slice of cheese and some fresh fruit, where they're supposed to be over there eating their broccoli and, you know, the other things that are good for them. So if you feed them, they will grow much faster, but they will also go and cause your pond to turn green very rapidly, okay? So you've got to watch that. And so with that, I will ask you if there's any questions. Yes?
What's the source of the algae?
It just comes in. It just blows in, you know. It's there, it's in the water, everywhere. It's everywhere. As long as you've got sunlight and you've got water sitting almost anywhere and it gets a lot of sunlight, you're going to get algae to form, okay? You can't stop that. Even if your water was 100% distilled, you would still, after time, get algae to grow in it. So, your question. Okay, for skimmers, skimmers are an object that takes the surface of the water off before the water goes into the pump. Now, a lot of times people will put their pump in at the bottom of their pond, and in doing so, they suck up a lot of the debris off the bottom of the pond. Well, this means that the debris has to fall into the pond, break the tension of the water, and then sink to the bottom, and then it gets sucked up, and then you've got more garbage getting clogged around your intake to your filter. Where a skimmer is like at a swimming pool. It sits on the surface, and those little doors that flap open on the pool, or that little edge where the water constantly flows in, this is a skimmer, and this pulls all the surface debris off and allows it to be caught behind the pre-filter. Okay, there's your pre-filter, and then you've got your big filter. Your pre-filter does everything that your filter does, except it also catches the larger particles. And there's skimmers that you can put on the exterior of your pond, like what we have here. And then there's also skimmers that you can put on the interior of your pond that have a lid that floats, and the water laps over into it, and then gets caught in a basin, and then that water then goes through and goes into the pump and gets recycled that way, so you're not pulling everything off. But your skimmer is your garbage collector. I've got the exterior skimmers. I'm waiting for the interior ones to come again. The ones that I used to have, they discontinued because they came out with a better one. Now, the other thing is that you can use nets to collect trash with. And with nets, they come with telescoping handles, but there's different types of mesh on here that I should explain to you. Your finer mesh that is nice and soft, these are usually for catching your fish, okay, so that they don't irritate them, where your large mesh nets like this are a lot more often used for taking out debris. And you can catch fish with these, but the issue is that they can scratch their eyes and get their gills caught up in there. So generally a finer mesh that you can find for fish catching is better. And I've seen people with $150 nets or so to go out and catch their fish so that they can transport them around. So that's something. But you can see with this one here, I can get out quite a ways into a pond and be able to pull off a lot of the debris. And I've got one of these in the back of my truck for when I go out to people's yards and they've got algae blooms. I can skim a lot of it off. And I also can pick up baseballs and other handy stuff out of the gutters, things like that where I can't reach down there. So, all right, any other questions? Yes? Your pH will affect that, but on your fish. And again, your fish like to be neutral or on your basic or alkali side, where your plants like to be neutral or on your acid side. So if your pH is very acidic, you're far more likely to get fish diseases, okay? And that's where I think you're going to see it, not so much on their appetite. Yes, yeah. I've learned my lesson. I try and have everybody check their pH now before we do almost anything. So, yes.
You mentioned those steaks, the worm steaks that you tore open.
Right.
And you said the benefit of it is that it's not harmful to fish.
Correct.
But if you don't have any fish, is there any reason you just can't get a regular steak with your pots that you have in there?
Well, other creatures like frogs are also affected. And so, you know, when you're having a pond, I try and have it be as much in balance of nature as possible. But if you're throwing other fertilizer in there, you will go and find that, again, you'll get your green water to really take off and grow. And so using stakes that are made for ponds is always best. Now, I will tell you other things. I've known people that get frustrated and they pour some bleach in their pond. They'll also pour other chemicals in there. It's not something that I'll ever recommend for anybody to do because dogs will take a drink, birds will take a drink, you know, all sorts of creatures out there. Anytime you've got running water, they're drawn to it. Honeybees, we get bees over here that come to drink here. So whatever you can do to help be more in tune with nature, that's one of the reasons why we have a pond, is because we like the sound of nature. It's always, I feel, a greater benefit. Yes?
The AccuClear. Again, we don't have anything in our pond but water and some plastic things, and some plants.
Uh-huh.
It was nice and clear, and now you can't see the bottom anymore, and I assume it's the dirt blowing over and collecting it. Would that AccuClear or the Simply Clear help collect that stuff?
Yeah, if you find that your water is hazy or that you can't hardly see in it, and you know you've got your filtering going on, then your Simply Clear would be the item that I would have you put in there. And this causes things to be attracted to one another and be, you know, grouped up so that the filter can pull it out. I will tell you that one of the things that I didn't make mention of is when you have a clear pond, your water hyacinths don't do well, okay? Because they feed off a lot of garbage in the water. They are something that pulls the nitrogen out and pulls the phosphorus out. So you are going to find that, and the hyacinths are those floater things that are clogging the river in Sacramento, and people are cussing up a storm because they can't go water skiing and they can't go houseboating and things like that. It's a bad, bad weed over there, which is doing a great thing for cleaning all the pollutants out of the water. And so at times, if you go and your water is too cold for your hyacinths or it's clean, your hyacinths won't perform very well. But your hyacinths have all these roots which also work as being a natural clarifier for you. And if you go down here and you pick one of them up, you'll see all this dirt just pouring off from them because the dirt was held in suspension around the hair, But that will work, and this Simply Clear will work as far as cleaning that up. So, you had a question?
If you have a healthy pond and a big enough pond, generally do you expect your fish to start breeding at some point? A couple of years, 5 years?
Yeah, when you have a pond, and even our little ponds like what we have here, and I call them little because I've put in some bigger ones, your fish will start breeding, and it'll happen usually in just a year or so. Goldfish usually live about 3 years, maybe 4, and so they got to get with the program pretty quick here, or else they're not going to have babies. And your koi, a lot of times people like koi because it's a type of goldfish that lives for 50 to 100 years, and so your koi normally don't start breeding right quick, but you will definitely see one fish chasing another fish all over through the pond, or 5 or 6 fish chasing one fish trying to sneak into the bushes, or whatever she can do because she's tired of the men chasing her. You'll notice because the men are relentless and the women are exhausted. So they've got a mission in life. That's one of the things that you can say about men. They're given a purpose and they will meet that. So, okay. Any other questions there? Now, I will tell you that frogs eat fish, fish eat frogs. So, at the beginning of the year, sometimes people will have a lot of frogs and other times they won't have any. And once your fish get bigger, they usually don't have any frogs. And once your fish get really big, big koi will eat baby koi, big koi will eat frogs. But they get so that they can't get into all these little pockets. And so if you've got areas where you plant your plants in your pond, not just set them in a pot, but plant them actually, and you make little micro areas for the frogs to live in where they're secluded, you can bring frogs back into your pond. But for a while there, your fish will usually eat up all your frogs. And if you've got a big old bullfrog, it'll eat all your 10-cent goldfish that you may put in your pond also. So you got to watch that. All right, I'd like to say thank you all for coming. And next week, do we remember what's next week? Anybody? Yeah, 4th of July. There's no lecture next week. And I think the following week I'm going to be out of town, which was on drought-tolerant plants. So that one's been canceled, I believe, at this point. So I'm going to try and reschedule that. That was, I believe, for the 16th. I've got to go to Philadelphia. So Philadelphia in the middle of the summer? Yeah. I appreciate your concern.
That would be a good
Yeah, I usually have a lot of people that are interested in drought-tolerant plants. And if you're interested, I've got the area up there by the windmill and the Hard Luck Cafe that has a lot of plants that are drought-tolerant. Now, while I'm on here, there's different forms of how much water you need. And I made mention that these plants over here in the pond are pond plants and these are terrestrial plants. The pond plants can live in the ground just fine. It's just that they like more water. Some of these terrestrial plants can live in the pond. It's just that the fertilizer that they've put in here can affect your pond. Okay? You can find an iris over here as the same iris as over there. It's just the different types of fertilizer. And normally you'll find that those iris over there are bigger and, growing faster because they have more fertilizer than these that are over here in the pond. And so I want you to be aware of that. The other item is people are constantly asking me, how do I get my pond plants to overwinter? For here in our pond, we plant the plants right in the pond, okay? And we have our best overwintering success that way. We pull them out of the pot, we stick them on top of the liner, we put rocks around them, and we call it good, okay? If you leave it in the pot, there's a greater chance that the plant will fall over or that you'll have it planted, or the pot will sit too deep in the pond, and that all the water that it gets all winter long will cause the perennial to rot, okay? If you think about nature, in places where these plants normally live, the precipitation in the winter turns to snow, the water in the streams decreases down, the ground usually dries to a much greater extent than what it is in the spring and summer months. And so a lot of times these plants that are water plants actually live in dry-ish or dry ground for late summer, fall, winter, and it's just in the spring and early summer when they're, you know, engulfed in tremendous amounts of water. So for you to go and have some of your best success in pond plants, if you leave them in the pot, I usually have you pull them out of the pond in the fall, usually in October, have some holes dug in your yard and put the pot in the hole and just plant the pot and the plant right in the ground, and then go through and water once or twice a month through the winter on these pond plants, okay? Don't throw them to the bottom of the pond. That, I find, does several things. One, it breaks up your water lilies. Two, it causes those pond plants that can't stand to be in that much water just to end up dying and rotting. And that makes for a horrid mess down in the bottom. So. Yeah, I just cut the tops off so you don't get all the leaf debris falling in the pond to end up. Oh, yeah, in the dirt you can cut the tops off too because they're usually dead. And, you know, I leave a little bit sticking up so I know that they're there, something to remind me. But, yeah, okay. All right. Thank you all for coming, and I hope I've answered your questions.